The house was full of children's laughter before I even knocked. I stood on my parents' front porch with a bag of gifts in one hand, and through the frosted glass of the door I could see small shapes running past the Christmas tree. I told myself I was hearing things. My father had promised twice that this year's party would be adults only. No exceptions, he'd said. That was why my 7-year-old son, Eli, was 2 miles away at his grandparents' house instead of standing beside me. I pushed the door open anyway. A little girl in a paper crown ran past me clutching a fistful of sugar cookies. Someone had the television tuned to a holiday movie. Toys were scattered under the piano. I counted without meaning to my sister Rebecca's 3 children on the couch, 2 cousins' kids decorating the tree, a teenage nephew hanging candy canes. 11 children easily. Every single one of them welcome. Only Eli had been told to stay home. My father found me standing frozen in the entryway. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked mildly inconvenienced, the way he might look at a delayed flight. "These children deserve to be here," he said, nodding toward the living room, as if that settled something. Something in me went quiet. Not broken. Quiet the way a room goes quiet right before someone stops asking to be treated fairly. I want to tell you what happened after that, what my father said next, and what my sister had been hiding from me for months. But to understand why that sentence hollowed me out the way it did, you need to go back 8 months to the week my husband died. Daniel was a structural engineer. He fell from scaffolding on a job site on a Tuesday morning in April, and by that evening I was a 33-year-old widow standing in my kitchen, drying a plate I'd already dried twice, because my hands needed something to do that wasn't shaking. Eli was 6 then. He built a bridge out of wooden blocks at the counter while I answered calls from the insurance company and read messages from relatives who all wrote some version of "let me know if you need anything," without ever saying what they were willing to give. Daniel's parents, Thomas and Helen, never asked what I needed. They simply showed up. Thomas drove Eli to school on the mornings I couldn't get out of bed. Helen filled our freezer with meals and sat beside me during every insurance meeting, taking notes because my mind kept sliding off the page. My own parents came to the funeral. They stayed for the reception and left before the dishes were cleared. My mother said crowds exhausted her. My father mentioned an early meeting. Rebecca arrived 40 minutes late, hugged me for less than a minute, and spent the rest of the afternoon telling relatives how hard the tragedy had been for her. None of that surprised me. It never had. Rebecca had always been the daughter my parents pointed to when they wanted proof they'd done something right. Polished, agreeable, good at telling them exactly what they wanted to hear. I asked questions. I noticed things. When she brought home an A, my father took the family to dinner. When I brought home the same grade, he asked why it wasn't an A+. 2 years before Daniel died, at my father's birthday dinner, he raised his glass and thanked Rebecca for building a real family people could be proud of. Daniel's hand had tightened around mine under the table. On the drive home he said quietly, "One day they're going to make Eli feel the way they've always made you feel." I told him he was wrong. After Daniel died, I found out he wasn't. At my parents' house, Eli's curiosity became something to apologize for. He asked how the antique clock worked, why snow looked blue in the shade, whether birds got cold sitting on power lines. My father would sigh and hand him a tablet to quiet him down. My mother would tell him to stop interrupting the adults. Meanwhile, Rebecca's children sat on the sofa with headphones on, and my parents praised them for being easy. One evening, driving home from another strained visit, I heard Eli's small voice from the back seat. "Mom, do Grandma and Grandpa get tired because I ask bad questions?" I gripped the wheel. "Your questions aren't bad. Then why do they look angry when I talk?" There was no honest answer that wouldn't hurt him, so I told him some adults confuse quiet children with good children, and that his curiosity was never something to be sorry for. He nodded, but in the rearview mirror his face didn't believe me. That was the night my grief changed shape. I wasn't only mourning Daniel anymore. I was watching my parents teach my son to chase the same approval I'd spent my whole life chasing and never quite earning. The insurance settlement came through 5 months after the accident, a little over $300,000, once the fees and expenses were settled. It wasn't a windfall. It was the number strangers had assigned to the future Daniel would never live to have. I split it carefully. Conservative investments, a dedicated account for Eli's education, an emergency cushion in case grief made it hard for me to keep working full-time. I told almost no one the exact figure. Then my parents invited me to dinner. My mother made pot roast, which she only cooked when she wanted an evening to feel important. My father poured wine before I even arrived and asked oddly specific questions about my mortgage and whether the insurance company had treated me fairly. Rebecca was there too, though she'd told me earlier she'd be out of town. Halfway through the meal, my father set down his fork. "How much did they pay you?" I knew I shouldn't answer. I answered anyway. Grief had worn me down to the kind of person who still believed honesty might buy closeness. "A little over 300,000, I said. The room shifted. My mother's eyes widened. Rebecca stopped chewing. My father leaned back like he'd just discovered a resource he hadn't known was within reach. "That's more than enough for one child," Rebecca said. "Enough for what?" She shrugged. "College. A house someday. Whatever you're planning." My father called me overly cautious. My mother reminded me that family helps family. Then, almost rehearsed, they listed rising property taxes, medical bills, the upkeep on the lake cabin they used twice a year. I ended the conversation and left. A week of silence followed. Then my father requested a video call. My mother sat beside him with a blanket around her shoulders, pale, while he explained that her cardiologist had found an irregular heartbeat and wanted further testing. He spoke slowly, dwelling on the cost of specialists and medication. I had already lost Daniel without warning. The thought of losing my mother too, even a mother who had rarely protected me, made it impossible to think clearly. "What do you need?" I asked. "Temporary help," my father said. "Just until things settle." Rebecca joined the call minutes later and announced she'd contribute $500 a month. Then my father turned to me. "With your salary and the insurance money, $1,000 should be manageable." Hesitation in that moment was framed as selfishness. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. Rebecca reminded everyone she had 3 children and only one income, yet she was still willing to sacrifice. I agreed to the $1,000. That night, sitting in my car outside Eli's school, rain striking the windshield, the transfer confirmation glowing on my phone, I said out loud, "I think I'm buying their love." Hearing it didn't stop me. I kept paying. What was supposed to be temporary became permanent within 2 months. My mother posted photos from the lake cabin days after telling me she couldn't afford a prescription refill. My father replaced his television. Rebecca praised me in family group chats for finally stepping up, though she never once showed proof of her own contribution. Worse, the money bought no actual support. When I asked my mother to pick up Eli because Helen had a medical appointment, she claimed a migraine. When I needed help during a late client meeting, my father said children made him too tired. Once, after they refused again, I called Thomas in a panic. He was in his truck before I finished the sentence. That evening, he brought Eli home holding a cardboard model of the solar system they'd built together. 3 hours of Thomas's time against my father's declined 40 minutes. The next morning, another $1,000 left my account automatically. By December, the payments had run 4 months straight, each one following the same rhythm. A warm message from my mother on the first of the month, a brief lecture from my father about responsibility, then silence the moment I actually needed something. Christmas was supposed to break that pattern. Daniel had loved the holiday with an almost embarrassing sincerity. Homemade cinnamon rolls, a ridiculous sweater covered in blinking lights, letting Eli pick one new ornament every year. Our first Christmas without him was already going to hurt. I wanted him surrounded by noise and family, Enough tradition to keep the empty chair from swallowing the room. A week before Christmas Eve, I took Eli to a science store downtown. He'd been saving his allowance for a build-your-own robotic arm that cost more than he'd budgeted for. While he studied a telescope display, I bought it in secret. My phone rang as the cashier wrapped the box. It was my father. The party would be adults only this year. No exceptions. I watched Eli through the glass, moving his hands as an employee explained how a telescope mirror gathered light, and asked my father if the rule really applied to every child. Every child, he said. My mother wants an elegant dinner. Wine decorations, adult conversation. Then, almost as an afterthought, you can leave him with the Brookses. They're used to it. He knew this was our first Christmas without Daniel. He said it anyway, like Eli were an item that could be checked at a coat room for the evening. I called Rebecca after we left the store. Did Dad tell you about the adults-only party? A pause long enough to be an answer on its own. Yeah. Mom mentioned it. And you're arranging childcare for all three of yours? We're still figuring things out. I asked her directly whether her kids had been invited. She got defensive, accused me of making Christmas difficult, and before hanging up said, "Maybe just respect what Mom and Dad want for once." That sentence stayed with me the rest of the week. On Christmas Eve, I dressed Eli in the red sweater Daniel had bought him the year before and drove him to Thomas and Helen's, where stockings already hung with his name stitched between theirs. I'll be back soon, I told him. I just need to drop off some gifts. Can I see Grandma and Grandpa tomorrow? He asked. I kissed his forehead and told him we'd talk about it later. Then I drove across the city with a bag of gifts on the passenger seat, and a feeling I couldn't explain away anymore. When I turned onto my parents' street, the driveway was full. Booster seats were visible through half the windows. I sat there for a moment staring, understanding for the first time that the adults-only rule had never been about children in general. It had only ever been about mine. I got out of the car, walked to the front door, and let myself in, straight into the sound of 11 children laughing, and my father's voice telling me exactly whose grandchildren deserved to be there. I set the gift bag down by the door because my hands needed to be empty. My aunt spotted me first, hugged me, then looked past my shoulder. "Where's Eli?" Before I could answer, my uncle called from the dining room. "Where's the little scientist? I brought something he'll love." The questions kept coming from every direction. Was he sick? Was he with the Brookses? Would he be joining later? Genuine confusion, not guilt. No one else had been told the party was adults only. Only I had believed that lie. My mother was arranging appetizers when she saw me. Her smile tightened for half a second before resetting, as though nothing were wrong. My father stood near the fireplace with a glass of bourbon, laughing at something. I walked past both of them into the hallway and asked my mother to talk to me privately. My father followed without being asked. "You told me no children were allowed," I said. "Keep your voice down. Why is every other child here?" She adjusted her sweater cuff. "Not every child." The honesty of it almost impressed me. My father stepped closer. "This isn't the place for one of your scenes. You created this the moment you lied to me." I asked why Eli specifically had been excluded. My mother said Rebecca's children understood boundaries, while Eli asked too many questions and demanded too much attention. I reminded her his teachers called him thoughtful. I reminded my father that his grandson had lost his father 8 months ago, and asked if either of them had considered what it would do to him to learn every cousin had a place at this table except him. My father's jaw tightened. Those children deserve to be here. And Eli doesn't? He didn't answer that directly. Don't twist my words. Rebecca appeared in the hallway, arms crossed, already talking about how I was creating drama, how Eli was perfectly happy with his other grandparents. I asked how long she'd known her own kids were invited. "None of your business," she snapped. At that exact moment, one of her sons launched a deviled egg across the living room. It missed its target, struck a framed photo, and dropped onto the carpet. A glass tipped over. A child screamed with laughter. I looked at my father. These are the children whose behavior earned them a place here. Children will be children, my mother said. But when Eli asks how a clock works, he's disrespectful. My phone was recording in my hand. Not for an audience, for myself, because my parents had been rewriting the truth around me my entire life, and I needed something that couldn't be argued with later. My uncle stepped into the hallway, having heard enough. "Richard, did you actually tell her not to bring her son?" "A private family decision," my father said. "We're standing in your house," my uncle said. "That makes it our business now." More relatives drifted closer. Conversations died out one by one. I walked into the center of the living room and, without raising my voice, told them exactly what had happened. The promise of no exceptions, the choice to leave my grieving son with his paternal grandparents, the driveway full of booster seats that belonged to every child but mine. My aunt covered her mouth. A cousin muttered that it was disgusting. My uncle came and stood beside me. "Enough," my father said. "You've made your point." "I haven't," I said, and turned my phone toward the room. The banking app was still open, the recurring transfer visible on the screen. For 4 months I've sent my parents $1,000 a month because they told me Mom's heart condition was putting them in financial danger. The room went still. Rebecca's husband, Kyle, looked at his wife. "And you've been sending $500?" Rebecca's face changed color. She glanced at my parents, waiting for someone to rescue her. No one did. "Show me the transfers," Kyle said. "We can talk about this at home," she said. "Show me." I opened the transfer detail, pressed cancel, and turned the screen so my father could watch the confirmation load. "You think my money belongs in this family. My son doesn't. That arrangement ends tonight." I confirmed it. My father's color drained. My mother gripped the back of a chair. Rebecca looked, for the first time all evening, frightened. "After everything we've done for you," my father said, "this is how you repay us." I thought of the funeral they'd left early, the school pickups they'd refused, the questions they'd mocked, and the money they'd taken without hesitation. "What exactly have you done for me?" He opened his mouth, but my uncle answered first. "They taught her what peace costs, and she just stopped paying for it." Kyle was still staring at Rebecca. "Was the 500 ever real?" Silence answered before she did. Then quietly she admitted it. She had never sent our parents $1. The whole contribution had been invented at their request, so that I would feel too ashamed to refuse paying double. They'd used the same old rivalry they'd built between us as children to manipulate me as an adult, and she'd let them. Kyle looked like he might be sick. "Our bills are overdue," he said. "And you've been helping pressure your widowed sister for money we don't even have." "I didn't think it would go this far," Rebecca said. "It went exactly where you wanted it to," my aunt said. My mother began crying, not quietly. She accused everyone of ganging up on her in her own home while she was dealing with a heart condition. I asked if the crisis had ever been as urgent as they'd described. She said the tests were real. My father added quickly that the costs were real too. I asked why they'd renovated the lake cabin deck 2 weeks after my first transfer arrived. A cousin pulled up my father's own social media post thanking a contractor for the long overdue upgrade. Someone else remembered the new television. Another relative mentioned the October trip. Piece by piece, the story fell apart in front of everyone who'd once believed it. There had been medical bills, but never the emergency they described. My money hadn't protected them from ruin. It had protected their comfort from inconvenience. My father tried one more angle, that I was humiliating my mother over money, after everything she'd endured. I didn't answer him. I blocked his number in front of him, then my mother's, then Rebecca's, holding the screen up so each of them could watch it happen. "This was never only about the money," I said. "You excluded a grieving 7-year-old from Christmas because his personality irritates you. You used Daniel's death to pressure me, and you trained your own daughter to help you do it. You won't get another dollar from me, and you won't get access to my son. You can't keep my grandson from me, my mother said. You already chose not to have him here. Nobody argued with that. Kyle told Rebecca to get the kids' coats. She begged him not to make a scene. The scene's been happening for months, he said. I just got here late enough to see it. He told her he was taking the children to his parents' house and staying there. When she asked if he was leaving her, he said he needed time to decide whether he could stay married to someone who'd helped defraud her own sister. Coats came off hangers. Keys jingled. My uncle said he wouldn't celebrate in a house where a child had been deliberately shut out, and left with my aunt behind him. 2 cousins followed. Then another family. Within minutes, the house that had been loud with laughter emptied into the driveway, children asking their parents why they were leaving so early. My father stood by the tree telling people to calm down. Nobody was listening anymore. Someone had recorded part of the confrontation after noticing my phone. By the time I reached my car, screenshots of the transfer and the cabin renovation post were already moving through the family group chat. I didn't post anything myself. I saved the recording for my attorney, in case my parents later claimed the transfers were loans. What spread through the family that night wasn't mine to control anymore. It was simply the truth finally loose. My father caught me at the door. You'll regret turning the family against us. I didn't turn them against you. I told them what you did. My mother stood behind him, still holding the gift I'd brought and never gotten to give. Are you really willing to destroy this family over one invitation? No, I said. I'm willing to protect my son, after a lifetime of letting you decide what I deserved. In the car, the adrenaline left all at once. My hand shook too badly to fit the key in the ignition. I cried, not because I wanted to go back, but because ending something, even something that had never really been love, still grieves like love when it dies. Then I thought of Eli waiting by a plate of cookies at Thomas and Helen's, and I started the engine. He ran to the door the second I arrived and wrapped both arms around me. Thomas was helping him wire a small motor from a science kit. Helen handed me hot chocolate without asking a single question. No one there had ever measured whether we deserved a place in the room. Later, after Eli fell asleep under a blanket on the couch, I told them everything. Thomas's jaw tightened, but Helen just took my hand. You never have to earn a place in this family, she said. The months that followed rebuilt themselves quietly. The $1,000 I'd been sending my parents went straight into Eli's education fund instead. I increased my retirement contribution and used part of it to enroll him in a weekend robotics program. On the first day, he hesitated at the classroom door and asked if the teacher would get annoyed if he asked too many questions. I crouched down. The right people will be glad you're curious. By spring, he was building simple machines with Thomas in the garage and fishing with him on weekends. Helen came to every school event. Eli started calling them Grandma and Grandpa without anyone asking him to. They'd earned it through nothing but consistency. My work sharpened too. Once it wasn't competing with weekly emergencies and the low hum of waiting for my parents' approval. I led a difficult campaign that quarter and got promoted. I stopped apologizing when something good happened to me. The rest I only heard secondhand because I stopped asking. Kyle filed for divorce after counseling turned up more of Rebecca's hidden debt. She moved into a smaller rental and sent me a few long emails, some apologizing, some blaming our parents. I read the first one and none after. An apology that won't take responsibility is just another request for attention. My parents lost both the monthly support they counted on and the social image that had protected them for years. They sold the lake cabin that April. My father spent 2 nights in the hospital that summer with a hypertensive crisis. I didn't celebrate it. I also didn't let it pull me back into the role they built for me. No money. No contact. At Thanksgiving, my aunt hosted the extended family and invited us. My parents weren't on the list, not my decision, though they blamed me for it anyway. in messages sent from numbers I didn't recognize. Every message said the same thing, that I had ruined the family. The truth was smaller than that. I had simply stopped shielding them from what they'd done to it themselves. On the anniversary of Daniel's death, Eli and I went back to the waterfront where our favorite photo of him and his father was taken. He carried the robotic arm, the one Thomas had helped him modify to pick up small objects. "Dad would have liked this," he said. "He would have asked you 100 questions about it." Eli smiled. "I would have answered every one." That was when I understood what I'd actually protected that Christmas. Not my bank account. The part of my son that still believed his curiosity deserved an answer. His grief deserved patience, and his presence deserved a place at the table without having to earn it. Revenge was never the cabin they lost, or the marriage that ended, or the hospital stay I didn't cause and didn't gloat over. Revenge was refusing to become what they'd spent a lifetime teaching me to be. It was building a home where my son never has to buy his way into belonging, or perform for affection, or make himself smaller so the adults around him feel comfortable. Family isn't proven by blood, or holidays, or the right last name. It's proven by who shows up when life becomes inconvenient, and who makes a child feel wanted without ever asking what they'll get in return. Eli will never again stand outside a door wondering why every other child was let in. Wherever he's loved and respected and free to ask his questions, that's where our family will always be.